There is a courtroom in Providence, Rhode Island, that does not look like much from the outside. It is a regular municipal court with regular walls and regular benches, and on most days it handles the kind of small matters that fill up city court dockets: parking tickets, minor traffic violations, expired registration stickers, and other modest infractions that most people would rather forget. But something unusual happens inside that room on the days when Judge Frank Caprio sits at the bench. Something that turns the ordinary into something people cannot stop watching, cannot stop sharing, cannot stop talking about. Frank Caprio has been a judge for decades. He is a man who grew up poor in Providence, the son of Italian immigrants, a person who knows from direct personal experience what it means to struggle, to work hard, to face the world without a safety net beneath you. His own story is one of resilience and determination. A boy who shined shoes as a child to help his family, who fought his way through school and law school, who built a career from the ground up. He carries all of that with him when he sits behind that bench. And it shows. It shows in the way he looks at the people who stand before him. It shows in the questions he asks. It shows in the silences he allows when someone is searching for the right words. It shows in the way he listens, really listens, in a way that most people in powerful positions have forgotten how to do. The courtroom in Providence became famous in an unexpected way when a television program called Caught in Providence began filming the proceedings. The show, which eventually found a massive audience through online platforms and social media, captured real cases being handled by Judge Caprio in real time. No scripts, no actors, no staged drama. Just real people walking in with their problems, their fears, their embarrassment, and their stories, and a judge who took every single one of those stories seriously. The show turned Frank Caprio into something people did not expect from a man in a black robe, a symbol of compassion, a face of mercy, a reminder that justice, at its best, is not a cold, mechanical process, but a deeply human one. On one particular day, a man walked into that courtroom who would become part of one of the most memorable moments in the show's long run. He was not a local. He was not from Rhode Island or even from the United States. And he was a member of a royal guard, a man who had spent years in formal service, standing at attention, protecting a royal household, living by a code of discipline and honor that most people can barely imagine. He had come to Providence, far from home, and somewhere along the way had picked up a parking ticket or a traffic violation, one of those small, mundane legal matters that feel enormous when you are in a foreign country and standing in front of a judge. He stood at the podium in front of Judge Caprio, looking every bit as composed as his training had taught him to be. He was upright. He was respectful. He was dressed properly. He spoke with measured words. But beneath that composure, there was something else, a weight that people in that courtroom could sense even before he began to explain himself. Yet there was a story underneath the surface, and Judge Caprio, with the instinct he has developed over a lifetime of sitting in judgment of others, recognized it immediately. The judge did not rush. He never rushes. He asked the man where he was from. He asked what had brought him to Providence. And slowly, carefully, the man began to speak about his life, about the service he had given, about the discipline that had defined his existence, about the sacrifices that came with wearing a uniform and standing at attention in the presence of royalty. He spoke about what it meant to dedicate yourself completely to something, to give years and years of your life to a duty that most people never see and never appreciate. And then something shifted. The composure began to crack, not dramatically, not in a way that was theatrical or performed, but in the quiet, private way that happens when a person finally says something out loud that they have been carrying alone for too long. He began to talk about the personal cost of that life, about what had been lost, about the loneliness that can come with total dedication, about the family moments missed, the personal life put on hold, the person he might have been if he had made different choices, about coming to a foreign country alone, far from the people and places he knew, navigating a world that did not know his name or his story or what he had given. The courtroom was quiet. Not the ordinary quiet of people waiting for something to happen, but the deeper quiet that falls over a room when everyone present realizes they are witnessing something real. The cameras kept rolling. The clerks and bailiffs stayed still. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, his hands folded on the bench in front of him, his eyes fixed on the man standing before him. He was not looking at a defendant. He was looking at a human being. What the judge heard in those words moved him in a way that he did not try to hide. His eyes grew wet. He did not look away or clear his throat and pretend it was not happening. He sat there and he let it show. This man who has seen thousands of cases, who has heard thousands of stories, who has developed a professional distance that most judges maintain as a matter of course. In that moment, the distance disappeared. What remained was one person genuinely moved by the life of another. Frank Caprio grew up in a family that understood sacrifice. His father worked hard in a country that was not the one he was born in a language that was not the one he grew up speaking, trying to build something for a family that depended on him completely. Frank watched his parents give everything. He understood from a very young age that dignity is not something that is given to you by the world. It is something you carry yourself, something you protect even when the world does not make it easy. When he heard this royal guard speak about service and sacrifice and the loneliness of a life given entirely to duty, something in that story reached directly into Frank Caprio's own history and pulled something loose. He spoke to the man with a gentleness that is not common in courtrooms. He acknowledged what the man had done. Not in a formal, a legal way, not the way a judge acknowledges a defendant's record or history, but in the way one human being looks at another and says, "I see you. I understand what you gave. What you did matters, even if the world outside this room does not always stop to say so." He spoke about service. He spoke about sacrifice. He spoke about the quiet honor of people who do difficult things without applause. And then he dismissed the fine. He dismissed it not with indifference, and not with a long speech about leniency, but with the quiet certainty of a man who had made a decision that felt completely right to him. The money was not the point. The law had been satisfied in spirit. What mattered now was sending this man back out into the world with something more than a reduced ticket, with the knowledge that someone had truly heard him. And the man at the podium, this trained, disciplined, composed royal guard, was visibly affected. He had walked into that room prepared to handle a legal matter, prepared to deal with the system, prepared to be processed. He had not been prepared to be seen. He had not been prepared for a judge to look at him not as a case number, but as a person with a life and a history, and a weight he had been carrying. He thanked Judge Caprio in the careful, measured way of someone who does not easily show emotion in public, and those words, simple, honest, real, were the ones that finally made the judge's eyes fill. The video of that moment, like so many others from Caught in Providence, spread across the internet in a way that surprised people who had never heard of a municipal court in Rhode Island. It found audiences in countries around the world. It was shared by people who had never had a parking ticket, people who had never been to America, people who watched it in languages that had nothing to do with English. Because the thing that happened in that courtroom was not about traffic law or royal guards or Providence, Rhode Island. It was about something that every human being on earth recognizes when they see it. The rare and beautiful moment when a person in power chooses to use that power to lift someone up instead of press them down. People who study leadership and justice and human behavior have written about Judge Caprio's courtroom as a model for what it means to truly serve the public. They point to the way he individualizes every case, the way he refuses to treat any person as generic or interchangeable, the way he insists on knowing the story behind the violation before he renders any kind of judgment. They point to the extraordinary results this approach produces, not just in terms of goodwill, but in terms of actual community outcomes. People who are treated with dignity in difficult moments do not forget it. They carry it forward. They pay it to others. The ripple effects of mercy, it turns out, are real and measurable. But statistics and studies cannot fully capture what happens in that room. What happens in that room is harder to measure than outcomes. It is about what people feel when they walk out of a courtroom versus what they felt when they walked in. Most people walk into courtrooms afraid. They walk in expecting the worst, expecting to be judged harshly, dismissed quickly, fined heavily, and sent on their way without any real acknowledgement of who they are or what they are dealing with. What Judge Caprio does day after day is refuse to give them that experience. He gives them something different. He gives them a moment of genuine human contact in a place they never expected to find it. The royal guard who stood before him that day had spent his entire career being formally invisible, present, watchful, disciplined, essential, but unseen as an individual. Royal guards are trained to be part of the institution, not part of the story. They stand at attention, and the world walks past them. For years and years, this man had given his presence, his discipline, his time, his youth to a duty that demanded he not be noticed as a person. And then he walked into a small courtroom in Providence, Rhode Island, and a judge with wet eyes told him that he had been seen, that what he had done mattered, that his sacrifice was real and worthy of recognition. That is not a small thing. For many people, that kind of moment, of being truly recognized for what they have given, never comes. They do the work. They carry the weight. They live the disciplined life, and the world moves on without ever pausing to say, "We see you. We know what you gave. We honor it." Frank Caprio has built an entire career on pausing, on stopping the clock for a moment and looking at the person in front of him as a full human being rather than a case to be processed. It is not an efficient way to run a court. It takes longer than the assembly line approach. It requires attention and care and emotional investment that would drain most people. But Frank Caprio does not seem drained by it. He seems, if anything, energized, as though the act of connecting with people genuinely, of treating every person's story as worthy of real attention, is something that gives him strength rather than taking it. He grew up watching his father navigate a world that often made him feel small. He grew up understanding the particular sting of being dismissed, of being overlooked, of being treated as less than fully human because of who you were or where you came from or how much money you had. He swore, in the way that people who have experienced that kind of pain sometimes swear, that he would never be the one to make someone else feel that way. And in his courtroom, with his questions and his silences and his willingness to cry in front of the cameras when a story moves him. And he keeps that promise every single day. The moment with the Royal Guard was, in one sense, just one more case in a long career full of memorable cases. But it was also something else. It was a distillation of everything that makes Frank Caprio unusual. His empathy, his memory for what it feels like to be on the other side of power, his refusal to let the formality of his position turn him into someone cold and distant, his insistence on seeing the person before he sees the violation. It was the kind of moment that reminds people watching from their phones and laptops and television screens all over the world that justice is not supposed to be a machine. It is supposed to be a reflection of our best human values: fairness, mercy, dignity, recognition. And on that day, in that room, it was exactly that. Long after the cameras stopped rolling and the courtroom emptied and the Royal Guard returned to wherever he was staying in Providence, the moment lived on. It lived on in the video that traveled around the world. It lived on in the conversations people had about it, in comment sections, in living rooms, in offices, in the small exchanges between people who had watched it and felt something they could not quite name. What they felt was hope, maybe, or recognition. The recognition that human goodness is real, that it shows up in unexpected places, that it is possible to build institutions and systems that carry it rather than crush it. Frank Caprio is not a perfect man, and he would be the first to say so. Now, he is a human being who has lived a complicated life in a complicated city and navigated the contradictions of a legal system that does not always make it easy to be merciful. But in that courtroom, on the days when he is at his best, he is something extraordinary, a reminder of what it means to truly serve. Not the law, not the system, people, the individual, irreplaceable, fully human people who walk through his door with their small troubles and their big stories and their quiet need to be seen. And sometimes, when the story is big enough, when the sacrifice is real enough, when the words are true enough, even a judge cries. And that is not a weakness. That is the proof that something human remains at the center of the work. That the system has not swallowed the man. That after all the years and all the cases and all the formality and all the weight of the robe and the gavel, Frank Caprio still feels what people feel, still sees what people carry, still understands in his bones that every person who stands before him is somebody's whole world, and he treats them that way every single time.